Greetings, vinyl community. It having been a while since I have done a Vinyl Finds video, I'm going to do a partial catch-up. So this will be basically Vinyl Finds from the month of May. More recent ones will just have to wait for a bit. And we'll start out with this album from Archie Shepp. Things have got to change. And isn't that the truth? Truth today, as much as it was in 1971 when this was recorded. This has a prominent credit for featuring the voice of Joe Lee Wilson. So side one of this is very much a free jazz over a funky chant of work all day and I don't get paid, give me my money. And the chorus sort of continues to chant while Joe Lee Wilson testifies over it, demanding his money over and over, but I don't think he ever gets it. Joined by masked percussion and a piccolo decorating the upper register, and gradually the horns emerge. It's divided into three parts covering the entire side one, but it really just is one continuous piece. Side two begins with a delicate duet for saxophone and electric piano. The very interesting sonority coming from the electric piano, played by Cal Massey, who is the composer of the piece. Dr. King, the Peaceful Warrior, is the title of that track, and the rest of the side is taken up with another Cal Massey composition, the title track Things Have Got to Change. More chanted vocals and crazed horn parts and even some electronic sounds. Great players on this. You've got the late Gratian Moncur III on trombone, James Spaulding on alto sax and piccolo, Howard Johnson on baritone sax, Beaver Harris on drums, just a whole bunch of great players. It's essentially a big band free jazz date. On Impulse, of course. Another free jazz entry, Leroy Jenkins, The Legend of I Glatson. I Glatson sounds kind of mysterious, but that's the title of the first track, and the second track is titled Brax Stone. So I think both of those titles have something to do with Anthony Braxton, a person who has certainly collaborated with Leroy Jenkins. This is a trio date with just Jenkins violin, joined by Andrew Cyrille on percussion and Anthony Davis on piano. And Leroy Jenkins is way up front, playing kind of abrasive violin, right up in your face. Plays in a very abrasive way, a lot of short phrases, sort of repeated rhythmic cells. Great pose on the back cover. And that's on top of wonderful playing from Anthony Davis and Andrew Cyrille. So from 1978, The Legend of I Glatson. The Ghost Opera. I know nothing about this. See it around a lot. It was recorded here in the Bay Area at Pacific High Studios in San Francisco in 1970. Not to be confused with Pacific Recorders, which is right here in San Mateo, but where a lot of the big San Francisco bands like Grateful Dead and Santana made some of their early albums. You can see by the credits on the back, this is a large ensemble. Most of the names unknown to me. I think the most familiar one is Jerry Hahn on guitar. Sort of a free jazz with some compositional sort of neoclassical admixture to it. And very worth hearing. And from the fully classical world, the first album by the chamber ensemble Tashi. It was a recording of the Quartet for the End of Time by Olivier Messiaen. And their instrumentation in Tashi was designed to perform this piece. Messiaen was, during World War II, when he composed this piece, was a soldier in the French army and was captured by the Nazis and was interned in Stalag 8A in Görlitz. And while he was imprisoned there, he wrote this piece for the 4 instruments that happened to be available to the prisoners: a violin, a cello, a piano, and a clarinet. And Tashi was formed by Peter Serkin, the pianist and son of the great pianist Rudolf Serkin, Ida Kavafian when Peter Serkin left us about 2 years ago. So the other 3 are still around, I believe. Ida Kavafian on violin, Fred Sherry on cello, and Richard Stoltzman on clarinet, an Omaha boy, if any Cornhuskers are watching, and I hope they are. A photo of the band showing this is the 70s, so they've got some of that kind of post-hippie regalia going on, rebelling against the black tie sort of image of classical music. Nice gatefold production on RCA Red Seal. Music of Messiaen. And a lot of you know about the Nurse with Wound list, which figured in the recent experimental vinyl tag. And I picked up 2 double LPs on the Finders Keepers label, Strain, Crack, and Break Volumes 1 and 2, featuring artists from the Nurse with Wound list. So this is a lot of very outside music. On this first volume, 2 LPs worth of artists from France, including Lard Free, Etron Fou Les Loups Blancs, ZNR, Pierre-Henri, Dachiel et Dea, and so on. And on volume 2, artists from Germany. And that includes Wolfgang Dauner, Association PC, Thirsty Moon, Brain Ticket, Ex Magma, and more. Great, very experimental, very outside music. And another artist who was on the Nurse with Wound list is Fred Frith. And this is the 3rd album he did for the Ralph Records label, hosted by The Residents, Cheap at Half the Price. This is the most pop album that Fred Frith has ever done, at least as a solo artist. Side 1 is just wonderful, catchy songs done in a very low-budget home studio way with looped rhythm tracks and some politically charged lyrics and use of sampling. The Gipper is definitely there making a guest appearance. This is my favorite Fred Frith album. This is just a really cool one. Side 2 gets a bit more into the avant-garde, but still short pieces, very accessible Fred Frith album. Picked up a whole bunch of folk and folk rock. I think somebody at my local vinyl emporium dumped a lot of stuff of that nature, including the first and last albums, or at least the original last album, by Pentangle, classic British folk quintet with Bert Jansch and John Renbourn, the wonderful Jackie McShee on vocals, Danny Thompson on bass, and Terry Cox on percussion. This is the U.S. pressing on the Reprise label, although it has, strangely enough, the transatlantic British record label address on the back cover. It is a Reprise album cover, but they left the British label info in the liner notes. And This just is a wonderful statement of intent. They sound fully formed right from their first album. They've got this blend of folk, jazz, blues, and a bit of pop, all mixed well together, and stir it all together and it turns into a slightly prog, because what is prog but a combination of elements from different musical traditions? So we have familiar folk songs like Bruton Town, their lengthy jazzy instrumental Pentangling, Let No Man Steal Your Time, which is a very fine song showcasing Jackie McShee's vocals. And the final album from their original run before Pentangle broke up in 1972. This is an album from 1972. They reformed in the 80s and have continued in various formations ever since. But this was the last by the original lineup before they reunited, Solomon's Seal. A lot of stuff with Bert doing the vocals, so not as strong on the Jackie McShee vocal side, but this contains one of the most beautiful things that they ever recorded, the traditional Willie o' Winsbury, which is just breathtakingly beautiful melody and familiar for folk rock fans as the melody that was used for the song Farewell, Farewell by Fairport Convention on the classic Legion Leaf album. And speaking of Fairport Convention, that folk and folk rock bonanza also included this album, Fairport Convention Full House. This was their first album after Sandy Denny left the band. Ashley Hutchings, their bassist and founder, also left at this point. So Ashley Hutchings was replaced by Dave Pegg, who remained a cornerstone of Fairport Convention ever since and still is to this day. But Sandy Denny was irreplaceable. So basically, Simon Nicol, the guitarist, Richard Thompson, the lead guitarist, Dave Swarbrick, the fiddler, and Dave Pegg all contribute vocally, and Dave Maddox fills up the drum chair. This is the original gatefold version of the US edition of this album on A&M Records. And it includes their their epic Sloth, which was it's a staple of their live shows, where it's a vehicle for lengthy jamming, the studio version being over 9 minutes long. There's a version of Flowers of the Forest on here, Sir Patrick Spence, a well-known Scottish folk song, great original Walk a While to kick things off. That's Fairport Convention. So when they lost Sandy Denny, she formed Fotheringay, and this is a British pressing of the Soul album by Fotheringay. No, it's not a Soul album, it's the only album by Fotheringay on the Pink Island label. And Sandy was joined by her partner Trevor Lucas on guitar and vocals, as well as Jerry Donahue on guitar, Jerry Conway on drums, who later would join Pentangle in one of their later formations, and Pat Donaldson on bass and backing vocals. And I think that the brief that they gave the cover artist was, make Sandy look as short as you possibly can. And there's the photographic evidence. My favorite album by Tim Buckley, Goodbye and Hello. It's just an amazing, amazing acid folk album. The lyrics are all by Larry Beckett. So this is a collaboration album. It's really the one where he's formed a songwriting partnership. And Beckett's lyrics are just superb. They're in there. I was surprised to find this. This is, I guess, an original copy on the Gold Electra label. The copy I had back in the day did not have this kind of gatefold, the standard gatefold. It was a Unipack copy that opened from the inside. So I was a little surprised that the packaging had changed at some point. Back to the British folk rock style Steel Eye Span, their third album, 10 Man Mop, or Mr. Reservoir Butler Rides Again. This was their last album with Martin Carthy until he returned in the late 70s. These folk rock bands are always having people coming and going, aren't they? But, this includes the classic, hilarious bawdy song 4 Nights Drunk, as well as the racing horse epic Skew Ball, the Wee Weaver, essentially all British folk, all songs from the British folk tradition that were retooled by the Steel Eye folks. And this is on the Mooncrest label. I think that some early versions of this album have an insert of some sort. This does not have that. And speaking of Martin Carthy, his album from 1977, Landfall, this being on the Topic label. This is strictly in the acoustic folk tradition, no rock element to it, although there are some non-traditional songs here. He covers a David Ackles song, His Name is Andrew, as well as songs by David Golder and John Kirkpatrick. Otherwise, it's all his adaptations of songs from the British folk tradition. And there's a picture from that same photo session that resulted in the Crown of Horn album cover. I think there's several albums that have pictures of him in this same setting with these same clothes on. And this is an album that it's an album that was never really on my radar, but when I saw it, I just simply couldn't pass it up. Side Trips by Kaleidoscope. David Lindley there, holding his strange hybrid harp guitar sort of instrument. This is an original copy, still in the shrink on the Epic label. And I got it for a good price, so couldn't resist. Nice, not exactly folky, but sort of folky bluegrass, acid rock combination all swirled together, some blues in there as well. Fun stuff. And while we're in the 60s, this one has been on my want list. Magic Bus, The Who on Tour. This is not a live album. It has nothing to do with The Who being on tour, but they put on tour on the cover just to irritate Pete Townsend. This is an album that, as Pete Townsend says, was the reaction by Decca Records, their label in the United States at the time, to Tommy being overdue. They wanted an album out on the market, so they gave us this, a collection of odds and ends, tracks that had been released mostly as singles, couple of repeats from the previous album, The Who Sell Out, in the form of Our Love Was Is and I Can't Reach You. A lot of novelty stuff, like their version of Bucket Tea and some of John Entwistle's comical songs like Dr. Doctor and Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And the more psychedelic stuff like Disguises and the title track, Magic Bus. Definitely an exploitation album, not a proper Who album, but great fun and something that scratches an itch for those of us who grew up in America listening to The Who as Decca wanted us to hear, not as The Who wanted us to hear. Another one I had actually been looking for, Faithful by Todd Rundgren. This is the album where he devotes side one to extremely faithful covers of songs from 1966-67. And he doesn't tell you what they are on the back, doesn't tell you what they are on the front, doesn't tell you what they are on the inner sleeve, which is a nice cream-colored, textured inner sleeve. But this is the album where he does versions of the Yardbirds, Happening 10 Years Time Ago, the Beach Boys, Good Vibrations, the Beatles, Rain and Strawberry Fields Forever, Dylan's Most Likely You Go Your Way and I'll Go Mine, and Jimi Hendrix's If 6 Was 9. And on the back, his own compositions, including Love of the Common Man and The Verb to Love. A couple of Rundgren classics there. A couple of albums by the late Vangelis Papathanasiou, from 1978. Boborg. This is noted for being one of his more avant-garde efforts. This is quite in the more, experimental and avant-garde electronic music side. And a lot of people find it a more forbidding listen. I think it's great. It's very much in my wheelhouse. And from the following year, an album that couldn't be more different, Opera Sauvage, very melodic, very sweet album, includes the track L'Enfant, the Child, which was used in the film The Year of Living Dangerously. Otherwise, the entire album is intended for a film soundtrack, the title track. This is an unusual pressing. I see this album around all the time, but this copy has a gatefold, which is not something I see all the time. This is a Dutch pressing featuring Vangelis on what I believe is some Indonesian percussion, playing that the gongs and the gender. And there's, I guess, a production still from the Opera Sauvage film. And this includes a guest appearance by John Anderson of Yes, playing harp. Vangelis was briefly auditioned to be a member of Yes. They didn't really get along as far as musical aims, so that did not work out. But they ended up getting Patrick Moraz instead, and the person that Vangelis was replacing was Rick Wakeman. This is a dollar bin find, not a great album, but a Rick Wakeman album from the 70s, which has some very fine keyboard playing, as you might expect. Gives you the list of all the various Moog synthesizers and Steinway grand pianos and Mellotrons and Mander pipe organs and RMI computer pianos that he plays. So it's a gearhead's delight. Nice, but nothing essential. Another soundtrack album. Finally, West Meets East, another bargain bin find. Yehudi Menuhin with Ravi Shankar. Actually, only one side of this is the meeting of East and West, in which Yehudi Menuhin joins Ravi Shankar's trio with Alaraka on the tablas and the tampura played by Prodyat Sen, a name I otherwise don't know. And the other side is Yehudi Menuhin with his wife Hepzibah Menuhin on piano doing the Sonata No. 3 by Enesco. Okay, that's it. I think we got through that about as quickly as possible. Behind me is my most recent CD, Hurtle Turtled Out of Heaven. There is a vinyl version of that in the offing. I don't know quite when that will arrive, but it should be pretty soon. If you're interested in the CD, you can get a hold of me. You can get it through Wayside Music as well. And if you live outside the USA, I would recommend Wayside Music, which is a great resource for any kind of experimental, progressive rock, avant-garde rock, electronic music, and jazz. And you can order a whole bunch of stuff from them and throw this one in. And it won't cost you so much for postage because you're buying a whole bunch of stuff anyway. So that's it. Thank you very much for watching. Be well. Talk with you again soon. Bye-bye for now.